did not come together. This was the scene at Montreal as he destroyed his third car of the season. And although 1991 has proven easier on equipment, the level of frustration has not ebbed. At this year's Winter Nationals, it was defeat at the hands of Frank Bradley. And a broken blower belt at the Mid-South Nationals gave victory to Laurie Johns, but Don Prudhomme remains upbeat.
Well, I'm frustrated, of course. Last year, 1990, was such a terrible year. We were so far down, and to come back up to the level we're at, we're very, very thankful for that. And believe me, we're going to win. I've been in this sport for 25 years, and it's just part of the game. If you can't accept that part, then you can't accept winning either.
And if experience has taught him anything, Don knows that each race is an opportunity to begin again. The National Hot Rod Association presents Championship Drag Racing on ESPN Speed World. The NHRA, the world's largest motorsports sanctioning body, showcasing speeds in excess of 290 miles an hour and traveling the quarter mile in less than 5 seconds. Championship Drag Racing from the NHRA. Each year, a coast-to-coast confrontation known as the Winston Championship Drag Racing Series crisscrosses the USA and Canada. With $18 million in overall prize money, the series today makes its 7th stop in Columbus, Ohio for the 27th annual Oldsmobile Springnationals. This is just part of the overflow crowd that is jammed into National Trail Raceway near Columbus, Ohio for the 27th annual running of the Oldsmobile Springnationals. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan, and final preparations are being made on Don Prudhomme's Top Fuel dragster. There are many folks on the grounds who think Don Prudhomme is the luckiest racer at this event. Why? Because in round number 1, he faced Jim Head. When the two cars left the starting line, they both lost traction. Prudhomme, though, backpedaled, got back into it. The engine continued to run perfectly, and Prudhomme took the victory to advance to round number 2, where all eyes will be on him in Top Fuel competition. In Funny Car, everybody's watching the defending champion. For more on that story, here's my good friend, Steve Evans.
1990 will long be remembered as the year John Force exploded his way to a Winston championship. Fire after fire after fire. Yet win after win after win. 7 total took him to the crown. 1991 for John done far differently. A perfect performance by his Oldsmobile Funny Car at the opening Winter Nationals. 3 final rounds in a row, winning 2 out of the 3, amassing a tremendous points lead. But now the gremlins seem to be creeping back in to this machine. And John, you can hear the thunder of Mark Oswald and Mike Dunn and the rest as your points lead is eroding.
Well, not exactly, not yet. I mean, we got by a round today, but we were 5 in a row, and then we fell off a few, but everything's going to work out okay, I think.
Not a little nervous about this deal?
I'm sick every round, but so's Coyle. It always makes me feel good.
Okay, good luck to you, John, whatever happens. Let's go to Dave McClellan. Top Fuel round 2 is up.
Steve, here's the defending champion. This is Frank Hawley getting strapped into Daryl Gwynn's car, getting set for round number 2 action. Before we get into the racing, here's the standings in the Winston points chase. Kenny Bernstein, number 1. Prudhomme is 2nd. Joe Amato, 3rd. Hawley is 4th. And Gary Ormsby, number 5. Here's the eliminations ladder and what's happened thus far. Low qualifier Joe Amato defeated Doug Herbert. Laurie Johns upset Kenny Bernstein and put him out of competition. Dick LaHaye over Tommy Johnson Jr. and Jack Ostrander upset Gene Snow. The other half of the ladder finds Frank Hawley defeating Wayne Bailey. It will be Hawley against Scott Coletta, who beat Jimmy Nix in round number 1. Eddie Hill topped Robert Reel. And as we saw, Don Prudhomme squeaked by Jim Head in the Battle of the Tire Smokers. So now here is Frank Hawley to race Scott Coletta. This is another emotional moment for Daryl Gwynn, the owner of the Coors Light Silver Bullet, driven by Frank Hawley and the entire Gwynn family. This was the race a year ago that Hawley won, marking the return to the sport of Daryl Gwynn after his accident in England. This year, the thoughts of the Gwynn family and the crew are on 2 longtime crew members, Gary Clark and Nick Flock, both of whom were killed in a boating accident off the Keys in Florida just a couple of weeks ago. Crew Chief Ken Vini standing behind Frank Hawley, directing traffic. He wants Frank to line up in the tracks that he left, coming out of the burnout box. Hawley qualified with a great 5:05, good for number 2, and he's aiming for his second victory in a row at Columbus. Meantime, Scott Coletta in the Coletta Flying Services entry qualified 10th at a 5:17. Lost lane choice to Frank Hawley in round number 1 when he ran 5:17. Hawley went 5:13. The quicker car gets to pick the lane, and in a somewhat unusual move, Frank Hawley has selected the lane nearest our cameras. Most of the time, we found the quicker cars in the far lane of the racetrack. Will it pay off for Hawley? And Hawley wins it in a ball of flame. The fire goes out very quickly, but Frank Hawley advances to the Final Four with a 5:15, 274 miles an hour. You see the safety safari truck pulling in behind Hawley just to check him out. Let's take a look again at how this race transpired. Scott Coletta in the far lane got a very slight advantage off the starting line. By the time they had reached the 16th of a mile, Coletta had a slight advantage. Then it was Coletta experiencing problems in the later part of the run. He lifted, and Hawley went on to a flaming victory. Let's go to Steve at the far end of the track.
This may not be as serious as it looked. You can see the 2 spark plug tubes out of that cylinder. Spark plugs blew right out, and that may have been, Frank Hawley, where all the fire came from. Let's hope anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what caused that. The car seemed to run okay quite a ways down the racetrack, and something happened to Scott, and we got around him, and maybe there's some good fortune with us here at Columbus, and if so, we'll take it.
We'll check on you in the pits. Thanks.
Thank you.
Back at the starting line, our next pair already running. This is Jack Ostrander. Remember, he had a big upset victory in round number 1 over Gene Snow. His competition, the car with the lane choice, is Dick LaHaye. LaHaye and Tim Horton-sponsored Top Fuel dragster had a 5:09 in qualifying. That put him in the number 4 spot. Ostrander ran a 5:21 to qualify number 12. The Ostrander and Lynch 300 bowl car is for the 2nd round in a row the decided underdog. He was only able to muster a 5:28 in his first round victory over Gene Snow, while LaHaye had that great 5:11. Both drivers now concentrating on the start. The advantage gained, if any, off the starting line is very difficult to make up down track. LaHaye the last to stage, and the first to leave. Dick LaHaye just keeps getting better. His elapsed time, 5.08 seconds. His speed, 278 miles an hour. He's in the Final Four. The 1991 NHRA Oldsmobile Springnationals is being brought to you by Oldsmobile. Stop by your Oldsmobile dealer and see what's new from the new generation of Olds. And by Goodyear, the unanimous choice of all the professional NHRA world champions from Top Fuel to Pro Stock. And by Quaker State, the big Q is One Tough Motor Oil. More Top Fuel racing coming up next. Funny car eliminator is the wheel of Roland Leong's Hawaiian Punch Dodge Daytona. They're getting that car ready. They'll meet Dominic Santucci in round number 2. That'll be coming up in a moment. Right now, Diamond P Sports onboard camera specialist Mark Orgera is giving you quite a sight. He's mounted a camera high atop the wing of the Valvoline Special. What a spectacular view. The competition for Amato here in round number 2 is Lori Johns driving the Jolly Rancher car. She pulled off the upset of the race in round number 1. As from her number 8 qualifying spot with a 5:12, raced the number 9 qualifier and the Winston points leader coming into the race, Kenny Bernstein, who also qualified with a 5:12. Lori had the lane choice. She took the far lane of the racetrack. Lori got a slight advantage off the starting line, then Bernstein smoked the tires and exploded the engine.
Kenny, as well as this car has been running, the last thing you ever would have anticipated would be this kind of an engine problem.
Well, it overwhelmed. It smoked the tires, and the R's went so high, Steve, and it just, of course, got it. But you know, smoke the tires. You can't win doing that. That's just a tough day.
Had it not been in competition first round, you might have lifted it. It had been qualifying.
Yeah, and I would have lifted, but, you know, at the time it started smoking, she wasn't around, and I said, well, I'm not going to lift now, but I know I'm going to be in trouble. And I was hoping she was having trouble, but she didn't. She put it down through there, and that's what counts.
Sorry to see you out.
Let me tell you something. She's got our number, doesn't she?
Well, that's about 3 in a row, I think.
That loss by Bernstein means that 2 men could take over the Winston points lead. Don Prudhomme and this man, Joe Amato, the low qualifier and the guy that ran 5:01 in round number 1. That gives him lane choice against Laurie Johns here in round number 2 of competition at the Oldsmobile Springnationals. Each round victory is worth 200 points in that Winston chase, and you have to stay in the race to continue to earn points. Bernstein, by his first round loss, is done for the day. Nowhere to be seen was Laurie Johns as Joe Amato runs 4:99 at over 283 miles an hour. Only the second time in the history of this fabled racetrack that a top fuel dragster has run in the 4s. That victory by Amato puts a lot of pressure on this man, Don Prudhomme, in the Skull Bandit. He faces one of the crowd favorites. We're talking about Eddie Hill at the wheel of the Super Shop dragster. Prudhomme came into this race in the number 2 spot in the Winston Championship. He knows the leader, Kenny Bernstein, is through for the day, but the guy right behind him, he saw Joe Amato take that victory and continue to earn points. Down at the far end of the racetrack, Steve is with Joe Amato.
Coming into this event, only Gary Ormsby had ever run in the 4s here at National Trail. You just joined a very exclusive club of 2, 499.
Steve, in the heat of the day, that's awesome. I mean, we're real nervous about it. I guess sometimes you should take power out of a car and it makes it go faster, because that's basically what we did, clutch and power. See, it's been spinning the tires a little bit in the starting line, and now we probably used all the power and right down there, 499. That's nice.
Oh, boy.
Joe Amato, the reigning Winston champion, continuing to improve. Thus far, the class of the top fuel field here at the Springnationals. For Prudhomme, he's got to not only worry about the points, he lost the lane choice to Eddie Hill by virtue of his 569 tire smoker in round number 1. Hill has selected the lane furthest from the camera, as we've seen most of the quick cars do. He qualified 3rd with a 5:06. Meantime, Prudhomme had a good qualifying time of 5:09. That put him in the number 6 spot. While with the exception of Frank Hawley, we have seen the quicker cars select the far lane of the racetrack. There appears to be very little difference, if your combination is right, between the 2 lanes. And Don Prudhomme proves my point. Prudhomme the victor at a 5.16 seconds, 276. The losing time for Hill was a 5:18, only 36 thousandths of a second, separating the 2 cars at the finish line. In the final 4, we find Prudhomme racing Frank Hawley. Hawley, by 100th of a second, has the lane choice. The other pair, Dick LaHaye, goes against Joe Amato. And, of course, Amato, with his 499, has the pick of lanes. Let's go down to Steve.
Well, it appears that crew chief John Medlin and Don Prudhomme were taking no chances on smoking the tires. Just get it down the racetrack.
Yeah, it wasn't very pretty, but, you know, after that last run, Steve, John Mellon made a decision just to kind of cool it, you know, because we had to have a baseline.
You ran a 4:16. Joe Amato showed you what the track will hold with that 99.
Joe Amato's strong right here. You know, he's like an Earnhardt right now. You know, he's just hard to catch, or I should say Allison. You know, when you're hooked up, it's really tough. And but we're coming around. Got another good shot at it.
They'll tickle it just a little bit for the semis.
Funny car action coming up next here at Columbus for this 27th annual running of the Springnationals. In funny car Winston point standings, the reigning champ, John Force, has got a pretty good size lead. But Mike Dunn, Mark Oswald, Ed McCulloch, and Jim White are all beginning to close. Here's what's transpired thus far. Low qualifier Jim White beat Gary Litton in round 1. Dominic Santucci topped Del Worsham. Mark Oswald over Jerry Caminito. And Al Hoffman beat Gary Densham. On the other side of the ladder, Mike Dunn, the number 2 qualifier and most recent winner on the NHRA Winston Trail, defeated Gary Bolger. Glenn Micros topped Richard Hartman. Ed McCulloch over Jim Murphy. And the reigning Winston champ John Force over Whit Bazemore. That brings us now to round number 2. Here's the blower drive service Ford Probe of Al Hoffman. His competition, the engine just coming to life, is the Pontiac Trans Am driven by Mark Oswald. This car, with Bill Schultz as the crew chief, had the low elapsed time of eliminations in round number 1 when Oswald clicked off a great 5:32 in the In-N-Out Burger Special. At the start of this year, Jeff and Susan Bernstein and Bill Schultz teamed up. They actually run 2 cars. This one on the eastern part of the country, another one on the west coast. Mark Oswald flies back and forth dependent upon location. This is Helen Hoffman, Al's wife. She's directing traffic while Tom Anderson, the crew chief on this Ford Probe, makes a final check of the race car, getting set to send Al Hoffman down track. Hoffman qualified number 5 in a 5:35, while Mark Oswald took the Bill Schultz-tuned car to a 5:34. That was good for the number 4 qualifying position. The lane choice here, riding with Oswald. As we have seen so many times before, the quicker car has selected the far side of the track. Sparks coming out from under the Oswald car, but it does not slow him as he takes the victory with a 5:38. Only 247 miles an hour. Very close behind at 5:40 was Hoffman at a speed of 273 miles an hour. He was closing fast at the end of the track. As we look again in replay, you can see the sparks coming out from under Mark's car. It appears that something may have been dragging during the run, creating the sparks, because it certainly does not appear to be an oil or fuel fire. Let's go down to Steve Evans at the far end of the track and find out what happened.
How hot do these exhaust pipes get? Well, look at that one at the rear. Melted right down onto the pavement, and that was all the sparks and fire we saw coming from behind the car. No big problem for Mark Oswald. He goes to the final 4. Good job.
Thank you. The only problem it caused is it startled me a little and I shut off because of it, but it doesn't look to be anything really serious. We've had a header problem before.
In the 5:30s.
Yeah, it's just running excellent. You know, I can't say enough about Bill and the rest of the crew in this In-N-Out Burger car. It's just been a pleasure to drive and easy to do.
Do you have spare headers or do you call the welder?
No, we've got spares.
Based on his consistent performance here, Mark Oswald, another of those racers putting a lot of pressure on the Winston points leader, John Force. Meanwhile, back in the pit area of the defending Spring Nationals top fuel champion Frank Hawley, the crew working on the engine that exploded into flame in that round 2 victory. The damage not quite as serious as it could have been. They're working with the same engine and should be in great shape for the Final 4 race with Don Prudhomme. A panoramic view, courtesy of the sunglasses of Chief Starter Buster Count, of this huge crowd jammed into National Trail Raceway for the 27th annual running of the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals. Buster's eyes are on the Snickers Dodge Daytona of Mike Dunn. He qualified number 2 with a 5:28 and beat Gary Bolger in round 1. That earned him the right to race Glenn Micras here in round 2. Micras at the wheel of the JP1 Oldsmobile of Joe Pisano had an expensive victory in round number 1 over Richard Hartman. After running 5:38 and 272, the parachutes failed to open. Micras went off the end of the racetrack, through the sand in a cloud of dust, brought the car to a safe stop in the cornfield.
Well, I tell you, Glenn Micras, if that didn't scare the crows out of the cornfield, nothing ever will. That was quite a ride.
Yeah, quite the ride.
You did everything right. You didn't panic. You didn't get it bouncing on the big tires.
Well, it doesn't do a lot of good to panic, I guess. It gets you in more trouble than you know what to do with.
You know, it appears to be more dirty than anything else with a few corn stalks up the exhaust pipe.
Yeah, I think that's about all it really hurt. It kind of went through there and slid down through there pretty easy, so I hope. And beat the nose up. I think we're going to have to work on her some.
We'll let you get to work.
After heading back to the pit area, the Pisano crew found that the engine had ingested a lot of dirt, and the nose damage was a bit more severe than they thought. So they have not returned for this round number 2 race with Mike Dunn. This is a big break for Dunn in his quest for the Winston title. It gives him an easy shot into the Final 4, and more importantly, it allows him to test without fear of losing. Dunn certainly found that lane to his liking. A 5:37, 274-mile-an-hour run. Mike Dunn continues to advance through eliminations here at the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals. Machines using some 4,000 horsepower to propel themselves through the quarter mile at times as low as a 5:25. That was what this man, Jim White, recorded at the wheel of the Hawaiian Punch Dodge of Roland Leong to take the #1 qualifying spot. In his first-round victory over Gary Litton, White slowed just a bit, reflecting the conservative attitude of Roland Leong and Wes Cerny, the crew chiefs on this race car. His competition here in round number 2 is Dominic Santucci out of Glen Willard, Pennsylvania. He defeated Del Worsham in his first-round race after qualifying 9th with a 5:45. White won his first title of his career earlier this season when he took home the Arizona Nationals crown, but has been unable to find that ever-elusive second victory. Santucci goes up in smoke. And White, with remarkable consistency, runs a 5:36 at 273, improving by 0.03 of a second over his first-round time. As White makes the turn at the far end of the racetrack, our next pair of cars getting ready at the starting line. Ed McCulloch at the wheel of the Otter Pops Oldsmobile challenges the #1 car in the world last year, the Winston champion, John Force. This was a classic struggle a year ago as Force and McCulloch met several times. We're riding inside with an onboard camera as John Force does the burnout in the Castrol GTX Oldsmobile. Force shortening his burnouts just a little bit at this event, possibly to keep the tires from getting too hot. Let's go to Steve.
Well, 3 winners so far in this round within 0.02 of a second, but this man right here with the red sock on is the quickest of them all at 5:36.
36 is good. I watched Mikey run and I watched Mark run. 5:36 is good. Wes and Roland, the whole Hawaiian Punch team have done a good job. We're trying to be conservative with this heat, but the car's running good.
Personally, how much does lane choice mean to you?
I don't know. We've been fortunate enough to have it all day. So far, the winning cars have been in the right lane, but all the good cars have been in the right lane. The better quality cars, maybe. So it's hard to say, but I'm glad that we have a choice.
Glad for you.
Jim White, one of the participants in the final 4. They'll be headed back to the pits to get ready. This is Bernie Federley, the very talented crew chief for Ed McCulloch. You see where he stands, and McCulloch looks right through that windshield at him to put him in the right spot. Force sits inside the car as he watches Austin Coyle make the final adjustments. He qualified #6 with a 5:37, while Ed McCulloch qualified quicker in the #3 spot at a 5:34. But in the first round, Force ran about 0.03 of a second quicker as he defeated Whit Bazemore to earn lane choice here in round number 2. John Force using a zoomy new Oldsmobile body on that car in the far lane. Both these drivers fell off a bit in the first round in the mid-540s. We're riding with John Force. And the Winston champ takes the victory by more than a car length with low elapsed time of the round. I'd say he stepped up. 5:35 at 267. Losing time for McCulloch, a close 5:41 at 259 miles an hour. The final 4 finds John Force against Mike Dunn. Force having the lane choice. The other pair, Mark Oswald squares off with the low qualifier Jim White, who has the lane choice in that pair. Back in Joe Amato's pit area, the crew chief Tim Richards and the crew preparing that car for possibly another 4-second run. Joe used a 4.99 to earn the right to race Dick LaHaye in the final 4. Let's go to Steve Evans at the far end of the racetrack.
John Force with low elapsed time of the round. You're in better than anybody else at 5:35.
Got to give that old man Coyle a little credit. Been sweating all day. I said, Austin, I'm just terrible on the lights. You got to give me some help up there. And he said, I'll give you some horsepower, bud, but we're just lost right now. Where'd that come from? Just out of his magic mind, I guess.
You lost on the starting line. Come on.
I've been lost. I got no vision out of this new Oldsmobile. I can't see. I got Gardella on the starting line screaming through the window at me. I mean, it's a panic situation, but we got down here and we're happy.
And sacrificed a few pistons right at the lights to do it. John Gardella from Castro, the man he's talking about at the starting line. I doubt that he was yelling at him through the window.
Steve, if the engine was running, he was reading his lips. Pro Stock coming up next with Steve Evans, and in Pro Stock Eliminator, the reigning Winston champ continues to dominate. Darrell Alderman holds a big lead in the point standings. Warren Johnson second, Jerry Ekman third, Bob Glidden fourth, and Scott Jeffrey is number 5. We're picking up action with the final 4 of Pro Stock. One of the pairs finds Darrell Alderman racing Jim Yates. Alderman got to the final 4 by defeating Don Beverly and Jerry Ekman, while Jim Yates topped Jerry Haas and Gorda Rivera. The other side of the ladder finds a pair of teammates, Scott Jeffrey going against Warren Johnson. Scott defeated James Antoinette in round 1 and Bob Glidden in the second round, while WJ beat Frank Iaconio and Mark Powick to earn his way to this final 4. The 2 AC Delco Oldsmobiles coming to the starting line. Johnson has the lane choice and has selected the far side of the racetrack. Scott Jeffrey joined this team at the early part of the season, and WJ has been using the 2-car operation very effectively. He gets a double dose of information out of every qualifying session. Scott Jeffrey ran 7.319 to qualify number 2. WJ also ran a 7.319, and what happens when you have a tie in elapsed times? Well, the higher position goes to the car that set the faster mile an hour, and in this case, that was Jeffrey Here in eliminations, the lane choice goes to WJ by 0.02 of a second. He ran 7.36 in round number 2 when he defeated Mark Powick. The boss against his hired driver. WJ versus Scott Jeffrey The advantage to Johnson by 100. Jeffrey using up a lot of his lane. And Warren Johnson in the finals. Elapsed time 7.34 seconds at 187 miles an hour. Jeffrey slowed to a 7.41 as the car began to get out of shape, and he had to corral it back in. Here is the surprising Jim Yates at the wheel of the Fram Bendix Autolite Pontiac. He is racing the reigning Winston champion and #1 car. You're riding on board with him. This is Darrell Alderman wheeling the Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona. Steve?
I want to congratulate Warren Johnson and Scott Jeffrey and this whole team, because you guys raced for it and put on one heck of a show.
Well, there was no holds barred on this deal. Everybody's, speculating that it's going to be a fixed deal. No way. I mean, we're out here to make a living and represent AC Delco and Oldsmobile the best way we can, and we can't have a show like that.
Plus, you ruin his spirit if you try to do that.
Oh, yeah. We're training Scott for better things to come.
Great job. Into the finals.
Thank you.
Steve, he's doing great thus far. Scott Jeffrey losing to his boss here in the final 4. These highly popular, sophisticated race cars have got a lot of limitations on them. They are limited to 500 cubic inches maximum. They run on racing pump gasoline through 2 4-barrel carburetors. Jim Yates used his near 1,200 horsepower to good advantage, ran 7.33 to qualify number 4. But his competition, Darrell Alderman, ran 7.29 to put him in the #1 spot, and you're right alongside of him as he approaches the starting line here in the final 4. Alderman with the lane choice has selected the far side of the racetrack. And as he approaches the finish line, Darrell Alderman by more than a car length puts away Jim Yates. That advances him to the finals to race Warren Johnson. His elapsed time 7.34, but it was 0.02 of a second quicker. Thus, Darrell Alderman will pick his lane against Warren Johnson in the finals of the Oldsmobile Springnationals. Back in the pit area, Dick LaHaye's crew getting his top fuel dragster ready for the ultimate challenge for LaHaye this day, and that is to face off against Joe Amato in the final 4. Amato, the only 4-second car thus far. Steve?
You and Warren Johnson go into the final round 2 1,000ths of a second apart, but the 2 belong to you, and you have lane choice.
Well, we certainly appreciate getting the 2,000ths. Warren's always a tough competitor, and I was really dreading Jim Yates there. I mean, he's been running so good this year.
This car traditionally tends to like one lane better than the other.
Yeah, if the bite's not there in the first 60 feet, and when you get it in second gear, if you can keep it from spinning, well, the car ET's good, but if it don't now, it don't run as good as it should.
Be on time. Warren has been all day.
Yeah, I'm going to try my best.
Always does, the champion.
More Final Four action coming up next at the Oldsmobile Springnationals. 4 cars remain in Funny Car Eliminator at the Oldsmobile Springnationals. It is the Dodge Daytona, the #1 qualifier of Roland Leong, driven by Jim White. This is the Hawaiian Punch car. Roland out directing traffic for Jim White. Bill Schultz doing the same for his driver, Mark Oswald. The In-N-Out Burger Pontiac giving up lane choice by just 0.02 of a second to White. And up in smoke goes Oswald. To the finish line in the finals goes Jim White. Look at the elapsed time, 5.33 seconds. His speed, 272 miles an hour. The best run of the day for the #1 qualifier, Jim White, as he goes into the finals to meet the winner of our next pair of cars, the Snickers Dodge of Mike Dunn, and the Oldsmobile, the Castrol GTX car of the reigning Winston champ, John Force. This is quite a team that car owner E.B. Abel has assembled. Mike Dunn is the driver of the car. The crew chief is his dad, Jim Dunn. The Dunn family, long a fixture in Southern California racing, now making a charge for the Winston title, held by this driver, John Force. Earlier, we heard John refer to his new Oldsmobile body. Between rounds, Steve had a chance to take a close-up look at it.
What John Force meant when he said he couldn't see out of this new Oldsmobile body is really not that big a deal. He has to cock his head, just about like so, to see the pre-stage light. And after that, he sees the tree and the track fine. It's not an unsafe deal. Now, Austin Coyle, the crew chief, can remedy that by just relocating the seat. He's already added a new device to the car. Remember the stovepipe we've told you about inside? It's still there. That vents the concussion of a blower explosion so you don't split the body right down the middle. But now there's a burst panel on the front of the manifold, so he's done the same thing. This is now twice pipes, one fore and one aft. Now let me show you the important stuff, what Oldsmobile engineers have done to improve funny car performance for John and their other racers. One of the reasons he has a little problem seeing is they've lowered the windshield for better aerodynamics, but also they've narrowed it up so the visibility is better. There's less distortion in it, John tells me. But the big news is back here. They have taken the roof line and dramatically angled it back. It used to be about like this, okay? Now they're getting air sooner into the spoiler area. They have lowered the deck here, so the spoiler looks bigger, even though it's really not. And John says he can feel it work in the middle of the racetrack. So can the engine. It's running harder and burning some pistons. Austin will fix that, too.
The burnt pistons occurred in round #2, where that body worked well for John. A 5.35, giving him the choice of lanes over Mike Dunn. This will be the first time in eliminations that Mike Dunn has been confronted by the near lane. He has run exceptionally well in rounds 1 and 2. The times varying only 1,000th of a second, both a 5.37. We're on board with John Force as he stages to challenge Mike Dunn. The winner goes to the finals. And Dunn with a huge hole shot. Force out of shape. Dunn long gone to the finish line. The time, another 5.37 at a speed of 269 miles an hour. Mike Dunn goes into the finals of the Oldsmobile Springnationals. Let's watch again. A near perfect reaction time gave him a big advantage. John Force, the tires losing traction. He went up in smoke, had to shut off, and Mike Dunn takes the all-important victory. The finals will find Dunn against Jim White. White having his choice of lane. Let's go to Steve.
Well, the candy car and Mike Dunn go to the final round, but Mike, your reaction time's so good, I wonder if you didn't gamble a bit.
Well, I think so. I was a little keyed up there. I want to really get a good light, and I know it was pretty close, so, but, you know, we'll take the win any way we can get it.
Well, the win, unfortunately, the time does not give you lane choice. That's going to concern your father a bit. He liked that lane.
Yeah, he does. You know, of course, our best runs have been in the left-hand lane all weekend, and traditionally the left lane goes away first, but it hasn't gone away yet this weekend, so I think we'll be all right for the final.
Great leave.
Thank you.
I wonder if he'll try that again.
Trail Raceway in the 27th Annual Oldsmobile Spring Nationals, getting set for the final four of Top Fuel Eliminator. The defending champion, Frank Hawley, at the wheel of Darrell Gwynn's Coors Light Silver Bullet, concentrating on his task at hand. Hawley, of course, the operator of the drag racing school down in Gainesville, Florida. We want to invite you to join NHRA and receive 48 issues of National Dragster for only $45 a year. In addition, you get a jacket patch, an NHRA pin, an NHRA decal, and a rule book. And if you call the number on your screen right now, you'll pick up a free copy of Drag Racing 90 from Diamond P Sports just for joining NHRA. Here's a longtime member. This is Don Prudhomme celebrating his silver anniversary in the sport of championship drag racing. His Skull Bandit challenging Frank Hawley. Both cars set. A little bit of smoke, a lot of smoke off Frank Hawley's tires. And Prudhomme is into the finals for the fourth time this season. His elapsed time, 5.10. His speed, 278 miles an hour. Back at the starting line, our next pair of cars getting ready. Here is Dick LaHaye in the Tim Horton-sponsored Top Fuel Dragster. LaHaye with a great showing thus far at Columbus and the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals. Going to need every bit of performance he can find, though, because the Valvoline Special of Joe Amato certainly proved to be the class of the field thus far. Let's go to the far end of the racetrack. Steve Evans is with the man they call the Snake.
Don Prudhomme, a 5.10 did the job, but you may have to find more for the final to come.
Yeah, I think so, but I think we can give him a run for his money, you know. Of course, we'll have to see who wins this thing right now, but, you know, Skull Bandit to Haviland car's been running real great throughout the whole race, and, you know, we've been having some problems, but it's coming back to us now.
If Amato loses here to LaHaye, you will be the Winston points leader.
Yeah, and that's something now. We, especially after last year, you know, we didn't even come close, and now we're, you know, got a shot at the championship.
But if Amato beats LaHaye, then you've got to beat Amato to be the Winston points leader.
No problem.
Okay, right. I'll remember that.
Now, is that not the picture of confidence? No problem. With a 4-second car, only the second driver ever to run 4 seconds at Columbus, Joe Amato. He's got to get by Dick LaHaye, though, and that may be tougher than he thinks. LaHaye with an engine combination that has produced very consistent power and a very talented driver, the 1987 Winston champ. That's his daughter, Kim. She's the crew chief on LaHaye's Top Fuel Dragster. He goes up in smoke. Amato takes the victory. Tim Richards, look, tells the story. That 5.12, there may have been a problem with that car at 277. And Tim Richards, as he breathed a sigh of relief and wiped his brow walking back to the pits, knowing there's a lot of work ahead as they get the car ready to race Don Prudhomme. By virtue of his 5.10, Prudhomme has the lane choice. In the Jim White pit area, the crew preparing the Dodge Daytona. He'll be in the finals to race against Mike Dunn for the funny car title. Steve?
No, Joe, I was watching Tim Richards, your crew chief, just before the race. I've never seen him that nervous. He was concerned about the track and Dick LaHaye, obviously.
See, something happened on the burnout, and the car was making funny noises. It had me a little rattled. It was popping or something in there. Maybe I over-revved it on the burnout, or something might have just acted funny.
A lot of you guys, though, in the hot weather have been doing shorter burnouts.
Well, we're all running different barrel valves trying to get reaction time, and it's kind of really making it hard to do the burnouts. And it's really, the minute touch the throttle, the thing jumps up, and it's changing things around a lot.
Well, you lost lane choice. You're 12 to this next 10.
I'll just take the win light. I was real lucky to get to 12, to be honest with you, the way it sounded back there.
Okay. A grateful man, Joe Amato.
There's nothing left but the finals in the pro categories at the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals. We'll be right back. We're ready for the finals at the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals, and here is one of them in Top Fuel Eliminator. This is the car of Don Prudhomme, being prepared for his challenge against Joe Amato for the title Top Fuel Champion. Right now, let's go to the starting line in Pro Stock Eliminator as the Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona of Darrell Alderman comes to the line to race the Oldsmobile from AC Delco of Warren Johnson. Johnson being directed into the exact spot on the racetrack that his crewman thinks will provide the best traction. Meantime, in the far lane, the same going on for Darrell Alderman as he approaches the starting line. Both drivers using every moment to concentrate intently on that Christmas tree to gain an advantage at the start. Could spell the difference at the finish line. And Darrell Alderman uses that hole shot or starting line advantage to win with a 7:33 at 188 miles an hour. Identical elapsed time for Warren Johnson, 7:33 at 188. As we watch again, Alderman got a little over 100th of a second advantage at the start. And the Dodge continued to pull away until at the finish line, only 18 thousandths of a second separated these two great drivers. Alderman winning his 4th national event title thus far this season by less than a car length. There was the margin of victory. That's 18 thousandths of a second. Let's go to Steve with the Pro Stock champ.
Darrell Alderman, it's a darn good thing you left first. That was a close drag race.
Yes, it was. Warren Johnson's always tough, and I really dread running him in any of the rounds, not just the final. He's a tough competitor, and every time we get beside each other, it's a good drag race for the fans. And Mopar Daytona, I guess, was just a little bit quicker today.
Warren Johnson, come in here. He just took the edge by 1. You guys have met 4 times. This was the 5th. It's now 3-2.
Oh, well, I guess somebody's keeping score. I don't know. This is too hard to keep score right now.
It's going to be like this all year long. There's no question about that.
Well, I'll go along with the way it's been going.
Well, I don't want it exactly like this, but as long as we meet in the final, that's all right with me.
A great champion and a great runner-up. Thank you, guys.
Darrell Alderman receiving congratulations from Warren Johnson. He increased his Winston points lead with this victory. Johnson is 2nd, Jerry Ekman in 3rd, Bob Glidden in 4th, and Scott Jeffreyon stays number 5. The sound you hear tells us we're set for the finals of Funny Car Eliminator. And it is Mike Dunn in the near lane in the Snickers Dodge Daytona. His competition in the lane opposite, the Hawaiian Punch Dodge Daytona, driven by Jim White, owned and tuned so capably by Roland Leon. You're watching as Roland gives his final instructions to White. The low qualifier here, the quick car in the previous round, that gave him the lane choice. He has selected this particular lane, feeling it will give him the most traction and the most possibilities for a win. But remember, Mike Dunn has been the picture of consistency. 3 consecutive 5:37s in the previous round. Tremendous race, and it is Mike Dunn with the victory. 5:34 at 275 miles an hour. Oh, so close was Jim White at a 5:39, falling off pace a little bit in the speed department at only 263. Let's watch again. There was a very slight advantage at the start for Mike Dunn, but his dad, Jim Dunn, had set that car up perfectly. Look, no tire smoke at all. The car just glued to the pavement. As they neared the finish line, White made a charge. At this point, they're almost even. Each driver can see the other. And then right at the speed trap, it is Mike Dunn and the victory.
Mike Dunn snickering under his helmet as he's the one who punched out Jim White. Great job, and what a race.
Oh, it was a good race. I knew Jim, we knew he was going to be tough. They've had that Hawaiian Punch car run real well all weekend, and but, you know, the Snicker Kmart Mopar, it stepped up and ran good when it needed to.
Your dad used a light hand on this car all weekend. Maybe that's what won it for you.
Well, we had a light hand the first round, and then we had a problem with it dropping cylinder the second round. We found a problem in the clutch to where we felt that it would help it out in the final. I don't know what it ran. It felt halfway decent, and it helped us. We didn't want to get too crazy on it. We just obviously wanted to win the race.
And you have cut John Force's points lead in half, from 9 to about 450.
Well, that's the best part about it, and it's you know, we've got a long way to go, and anything can happen. And you know, I just want to thank the crew, my dad, Jim Dunn, Walt, Steve, Sandy, Diane, my wife, Sandy.
A great champion, Mike Dunn. He could go all the way this year.
The time of a 5:34, his quickest of the day for Mike Dunn, the Funny Car champion. The final adjustments being made on Joe Amato's top-fuel dragster. He's coming up next in the finals. Only 2 cars remain at the Oldsmobile Springnationals. The finals in Top Fuel Eliminator. Joe Amato, the reigning Winston champ, against the possible sentimental favorite. We're talking about Don Prudhomme. It has been 21 years since the Snake won a Top Fuel title. He earned the lane choice in the Skull Bandit and is selected the far side of the racetrack. Amato and his Valvoline car is in the near lane for the first time all day. And Amato goes up in smoke, and look at Prudhomme disappear across the finish line. 5:08, 281 miles an hour. And Prudhomme is back in the winner's circle in Top Fuel Dragster. Jerry Amato congratulating Lynn Prudhomme on the victory by the Snake. Let's watch and see what happened as Joe Amato had a slight advantage off the starting line. But the power of his race car just too much for the near lane, and the smoke billowing off those tires indicated a loss of traction. A replay from the camera angle high atop the wing. You see the smoke on the tires at the bottom of the screen? That's when he lost traction, and look at Prudhomme disappear into the cloud of piston smoke.
Well, he burned it up to do it, but Don Prudhomme has just won his first Top Fuel race in 21 years, since the 1970 U.S. Nationals. Who says you can't go home again?
Yeah, I guess it's never too late.
This thing stinks, by the way. Let's move over.
It sure does.
It is blown up.
But right now, I absolutely love it. You know, the Skull Bandit Havlin car just, it was running good. And, you know, Amato was a car to beat, but, you know, things were starting to work our way a little bit, too. And I'm just pleased to be in the winner's circle after all we went through.
You felt this thing coming unglued, and you just rode it.
Yeah, it was just, you know, I didn't care, you know, just as long as that wind light would come on at the end. But my crew, John Medlin, and all the guys just did a great job, and it wasn't for them, this wouldn't be happening.
Not only will you pocket about $30,000, but also you take the Winston points lead. Either one of you would, whoever won.
Well, that's amazing. I'm just pleased, you know, once I wanted to come into Top Fuel, you know, for many years, and the race class guys like Amato and them, and, you know, and it's just super to be running him.
You wanted to run it right to the wire. You were looking forward to this race.
Well, I was looking forward to it. You know, it was one of them wheels. Whoever's going to win here is going to take the points lead. So that put a lot of pressure on both of us. But Don did a good job, and congratulate him. And we'll be back next time. What can I say?
We'll see both of you in Montreal in just, well, the next race.
Yeah, I think we'll manage to show up.
A lot of racing left before the year is over.
Yeah, this isn't over.
Steve, that's an understatement. There's 11 races left in the 91 season. Prudhomme has moved into the lead. Joe Amato is second in the Winston standings. Kenny Bernstein has dropped to third. Frank Hawley is fourth, and Laurie Johns is number 5. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Columbus, Ohio. The 1991 NHRA Oldsmobile Springnationals has been brought to you by Oldsmobile. Stop by your Oldsmobile dealer and see what's new from the new generation of Olds. And by Autolite Spark Plugs, guaranteed for 2 years, no matter how far you go. And by Midas for mufflers, brakes, and shocks. Nobody beats Midas. Nobody. Coverage of the NHRA Springnationals has been a presentation of Diamond P Sports in association with ESPN.